What happens when you take an A-list celebrity, cast him as an established comic book villain, make him completely unrecognizable, intro his take on the character through the guided vision of Matt Reeves, and then promise him a series to fully explore his new persona? Well, you get HBO's newest hit series, The Penguin. Following hot off the heels of the events that took place in 2022's The Batman, the second entry in the Reeves-verse focused on everyone's favorite avian-named gangster, Oswald Cobb. Yes, Oswald Cobb, not Oswald Cobblepot. Feel free to get mad, comic purists. Who cares? The guy's great. As he navigates a brand new landscape in Gotham. Look, I'm excited for James Gunn's plans for the DCU. I think Superman is going to be a great film, and I'm excited about some of the other projects they have in store, but Matt Reeves Gotham, his Batman right now, is the thing that's got me most excited. It feels like the true vision of an auteur, and the way things ended at the end of the Batman, it left the door open for so many different possibilities, whether they included Batman or not. We can explore Gotham in so many different ways, and I think The Penguin is the first attempt to do so, and it's doing so in a way with this gritty crime drama that really highlights the depravity and dark undercurrents of Gotham City. The limited series strikes an incredibly difficult balance by adding onto the world built by Reeves while never crossing the line of using its feature-length prologue as a crutch. After discussing the show with a friend who, shockingly, hadn't seen Pattinson don the cowl in The Batman, I know, they fixed that afterwards, and it's insane that they hadn't seen the film, but regardless, I think it's really cool because they thoroughly enjoyed the series, and it helped me realize that the secret to the Penguin's success starts with its incredible ability to add weight and life, or, maybe lack thereof it, to the streets of Gotham. Gotham City is, at its core, a cesspool that pushes people to extremes and forces them to fend for themselves. The Batman excels in showcasing the gross and extreme class disparity within the city, and the Penguin faithfully continues Reeves' depiction of the all-out class war that has taken over the streets of Gotham. The Riddler blew open the floodgates, and there's a power grab in play. People are going to take this opportunity to seize what they were previously denied, and the Penguin is the perfect vehicle to do so, because he represents a Gotham who's tired of playing second fiddle, who feels entitled to the lifestyle of the elite. However, the poor continue to suffer, even more so after the Riddler's attacks, while the wealthy remain untouched. Hardly even affected by all of this. Riddler fucked over the very people he supposedly was trying to empower. The Riddler may have used the rhetoric of a freedom fighter or a disruptor, but he was nothing more than a sad, vindictive conspiracy theorist who just wanted to burn the whole thing down instead of rebuilding it, instead of doing something to change things, instead of helping other people. He really didn't give a shit about it. He just wanted to take the whole goddamn thing with him. Oz also claims to crusade for the lower class, but his mission to uplift the community that raised him is less of a goal and more of a shell. He tells those that ask, and honestly a lot of people seem to ask, that his drive for a better life is driven by a desire to make the city a better place for those who can't afford for it not to be, to help them take what's theirs, what they've been denied for so long. But in reality, he just wants unconditional love and respect from the world around him no matter what, to have his fragile ego stroked and never challenged. Bruce deals with a similar crisis in The Batman, realizing that his mission to better the community was really just a veiled excuse for him to work out his childhood trauma. He was vengeance, directing his anger and aggression at whoever kind of came his way that was remotely bad. The difference between Bruce and the bad guys, Riddler, Penguin, is that Bruce stops buying into the delusion and has a come-to-Jesus moment when one of the Riddler thugs uses his own motto against him while committing an act of terrorism.
I'm vengeance.
Bruce learns that he has to be something more, an example, a selfless hero, a beacon of hope. Oz thinks he's doing just that for people like him, slumming it on the East Side, or at least that's kind of what he's deluded himself into thinking so he can sleep at night. But by the series finale, no one has benefited except for Oz. While he lands the penthouse suite of his dreams with his mother forcibly by his side, the rest of Crown Point is still in ruins. In fact, worse than ever because of the Penguin's existence. He's done nothing to solve their problem. He only cares about himself. He took advantage of their desperate state to prop himself up. By tactically adding to the world that Reeves built by populating it with fully fleshed out characters who have lived through the Riddler's terrorism, the Penguin acts as both a footnote to the film that preceded it and as an independent monolith that's fully able to stand on its own without the help of a movie to set it up. Again, it pushed my friend to finally want to sit down and watch The Batman out of curiosity. Never out of necessity, which, you can be like, well, who the fuck doesn't want to watch The Batman? But, if a show like The Penguin, which doesn't require you to watch The Batman, can do that, that's the mark of a really great piece of entertainment. With that being said, the show's ability to strike the perfect balance as both a follow-up to its predecessor and as a standalone story isn't what made it truly shine throughout its 9-episode run. No. What elevates The Penguin from being just another comic book show is its insistence on using the ravaged state of Gotham's crime food chain as a plot device to examine its main players, its characters, rather than making it the series' primary focus. What elevates it is that it wants to be more than a comic book show. It wants to be, and succeeds at being, a prestige crime drama worthy of the HBO name. The Penguin is an incredibly detailed case study of Oswald Cobb, and easily the most grounded take of the character's 3 live-action depictions. And look, I love Danny DeVito in Batman Returns, and I think that's a great version of the Penguin character, but what I really love about this version, about Colin Farrell's definitive take on the Penguin, is that it incorporates all of the elements of the best versions of the Penguin, whether it be from the Arkham games, the Telltale games, some of the comic arcs, and then blends it with a bit of outside influences, such as the Sopranos. And the best part about it is that there's no delusions about who this guy is. Right from the jump, the Penguin is shown to be a bad guy, a villain. He's not some misunderstood character. He's not someone who's got a point, but maybe goes about it the wrong way. No, he is a bad guy through and through. And though the show might try and play with your sympathy for that character, he never deviates from his purpose, from his directive. And it's so refreshing to see a villain who is just through and through a villain. Because for someone like the Penguin, someone who, for all of their iterations, isn't really that great of a person and is someone just utterly despicable, it's nice to see them commit to that. Yes, we can feel sympathy because of his disability, but when the character sees that and relies on that as a crutch in order to do horrible things, I mean, you lose that sympathy pretty quickly. It's just, that crutch becomes the defining factor for that character, the mass motivator for his actions. And nowhere is that seen more clearly and more effectively than in Colin Farrell's definitive take on the Penguin. While initially Farrell's version of the character may be seen as a bit relatable, the most relatable version of the Penguin we've seen to date, as we ride along with Oz, we start to uncover his drives and reasons for clawing his way up the crime ladder. In the very first episode, we meet Oz's mother, portrayed beautifully by Deirdre O'Connell. Like, she is killing it in this series. I mean, everyone is, but she gives such a chilling performance. Her continued existence is secret to everyone but Oz, his new driver Vic, and now us. In its own meta way, the show and Oz himself show us that they're trusting us with this secret, that we, complete strangers, are more trustworthy than any other ally that Oz could possibly find in Gotham. HBO's limited series puts you in the driver's seat, but never gives you control of the wheel, as it invites you to look deeper and peel back the layers of the Penguin, only to sucker punch you with the hard truth. Oz Cobb is exactly who you expect him to be, from the beginning right until the bitter end. The brilliance of The Penguin is that it shows its entire hand within the first 10 minutes of the first episode. After Carmine Falcone meets his untimely end in The Batman, the series begins as Oz attempts to raid the former crime boss's safe for potential blackmail he can use against the rest of the family. However, before he can get out of Carmine's penthouse, he's confronted by the new head of the household, Alberto Falcone. What follows is a touching monologue delivered by Farrell about a gangster who lived in Oz's neighborhood growing up. In his words, a man who looked out for his community, his neighborhood, who cared about everyone and in turn was adored by that community.
In my neighborhood, they throw a parade in his honor.
This really sets the stage for what Oz wants in life. He wants attention, he wants to be adored, he wants monuments in his name, he wants to be remembered. He doesn't want to play second fiddle to anyone anymore. He just wants fame, publicity, respect, and adoration. And that's what he thinks that this gangster gave his community, without really understanding what it was that this gangster did for his community in order to get that respect. Oz simply thinks that it's a matter of being in control, that that's what's going to get you the power, but we soon find out that that's not the case, and in fact, you could argue that Oz is rejected by that community, which is why he winds up in the penthouse at the end of the series. He gets what he wants, and it costs him everything in the end. Alberto sees this desperate need for attention, this need for Oz to have his ego stroked, and, well, what follows is very telling. It's not only the catalyst for the entire series, but it sets Oz on the path that will ultimately define who he is as a person.
What a little bitch.
This is our first full look at the deep-seated insecurity and subsequent compulsive tendencies that are intrinsic to the character of Oz. This event not only propels us into the show's main conflict, but also tees up Oz's unpredictability and unhinged, Sphinx-like behavior. On one hand, he's incredibly easy to read, but on the other, I mean, a little less so. You never know when he's gonna snap. Our willingness to believe there's something more going on, that he's deserving of our sympathy, is weaponized against us at every turn throughout the season. The beauty in this opening sequence is that, while it wears the disguise of being a peek behind the curtain into old Oz Cobb, the person presented in this scene, from monologue to murder, is as deep as Oz gets. A delusional psychopath with extreme narcissistic tendencies. However, this scene lures us as the audience into a falsehood. It leads us to believe that Oz Cobb is a champion of the people and a broken product of a traumatizing childhood event, just trying his best to move up in an unfair world. It instills in us a thirst to find out more about what makes this clearly disturbed but possibly relatable man tick. And the series pilot doesn't hold out on us in quenching that thirst, giving us a taste first through Oz's sparing of Vic, a wannabe car thief driven to crime after his neighborhood's destruction, and then fully quenching our thirst by introducing us to Oz's mother, whom he's sworn to take care of in her decaying state by finally reaching the levels of success he's promised her his entire life. At face value, this is a guy who's incredibly sympathetic, who is hopelessly in search of his parents' approval, whose mom is kind of pulling the strings a bit, who feels like if he can do all of these things, he can fix the broken relationship, that he can get the respect and love he so desperately needs from his mother. But by the end, we realize that that's just all bullshit. It's something that Oz made up in his head. As his mother says, she had enough love to give. He just wanted more of it. What she could give was not enough for him. And so this idea of being on top, of being in this penthouse or whatever, naturally, when Oz gets there, it's not going to be enough. He's going to want more, because this is a guy who can't be satiated. His narcissism knows no bounds. But by the end of episode 1, I mean, it's a testament to the writers that they have us saying, hey, now, this is a bad guy for sure, but this is a gangster that I can get behind who might actually have some halfway decent motives. Kind of. What the show does from this point on is test this newfound trust the audience has placed in its questionable protagonist. We watch as Oz screws over every single person that places an ounce of trust in him, whether it be a Falcone, a Maroni, or even a woman he claimed to love. We're willing to go along with him because we know these criminal organizations to be destructive to Gotham City. Not only that, but we've seen them commit horrible atrocities to maintain control over the city. These are hardly sympathetic people, and so it could be argued that Oz maybe did a good thing in ridding Gotham of them. It can also be argued that he didn't directly screw over Eve Carlo, but his trail of selfish improvisations led a woman warped by revenge to her doorstep, something he insisted wouldn't happen despite her constant warnings about the consequences of his actions hurting those around him. The thing is, after watching this show in its entirety, I fully believe Oz understood these potential consequences his actions could get Eve into. For Oz, if those consequences affect him, it's a problem. If they affect anyone else, well, it's just the way it is. It's collateral damage. The genius behind every move in Oz's personal chess match was that we, as the audience, found ourselves forgiving these actions time and time again. We, like Salvatore or Sofia, made excuses for Oz because
you are so good at talking your way out of things, even at the cost of someone else's life.
when it comes to Oz's world, be you hero, villain, or something in the middle, you're just another piece in the game. It's why Oz stands shoulder to shoulder with the Walter Whites and Tony Sopranos of prestige television in the most toxic relationship a show has asked its audience to stay in. From his insecure and internal need for validation that ends in a pale imitation of his mom being paid to whisper in his ears what he wants to hear, to the fact that he's nothing more than a coward who can't even muster up the spine to grant his mother her only wish, pulling the plug before her mind leaves her, to his refusal to make genuine connections because he sees them as a weakness his enemies will exploit with little upside to him, to his inability to address his emotions, to uncover the objective truth behind his actions, to continuously make excuses for everything he does. Oz holds us, the audience, captive through the lies he tells himself and others because he can't face the truth of what he is, a monster. He claims that he's someone who grew up abandoned by Gotham, slumming it, understands the people and the neighborhood and wants to look out for them. And while, yeah, he maybe did grow up in a rougher part of Gotham City, it's pretty clear through the flashbacks that he was doing a bit better than most people. He wasn't in a mad scramble for survival like he would paint his picture. He just wants to be the victim. He wants to be relatable. He wants a platform that he can use in order to get what he wants. And while he does do good things for his community, I mean, more than they were ever really afforded prior, they're nothing more than a byproduct of his ego-driven crusade. He doesn't actually want to help, he just wants the attention and respect someone like Rex, the gangster of his youth, garnered while missing why that was the case. Rex had relationships with people, good or bad. He was a part of that community. I mean, he even tried to help Oz's mom out of a tough situation, doing something that wouldn't necessarily benefit him, but would benefit her. He was someone who clearly wasn't a great person, but also knew when to help other people out. And that's the key difference. Oz isn't able to do that. He just has this simple perception of what a gangster is, informed by television and a child's fantasy. He's emotionally stunted, never growing past adolescence, and his persistent need for validation from his mother, that need to be suffocated with her love. But it's this lie that keeps us captivated, keeps us wanting more from the Penguin. We want so badly for there to be a tragic event or a traumatic environment to pin Oz's actions on. But the truth is that Oz's tragedy, his struggle, has been sculpted by his own hands. He wants you to think he's the victim so you can play right into his hands. In contrast, the hands that created Sofia Falcone's reality were her father's, and they did less sculpting as they did, well, suffocating, strangling, even after his death. So with that being said, before we get into the worst victim of this season-long toxic relationship, we need to first discuss Oz's main opponent and biggest obstacle throughout the series, Sofia Gigante. In a career best performance from Kristen Milioti, Gigante is the most morally complex and interesting character in The Penguin. Devolving from faithful daughter to scorn-fueled murderer right before our eyes, Milioti's performance may rival, if not overshadow, Farrell's in that Oz's character is a constant, while Sofia's, from top to bottom, is a journey, and a painful one at that. A victim of her father's cruelty, she not only endures the staged suicide of her mother, but survives 10 years in Arkham Asylum after being framed for multiple accounts of murder by her father and supposedly faithful driver, Oz, being released from said asylum only to find her brother, the only person who believed in her, who trusted her, who was going to find a way to get her out of Arkham, dead. Allow her sympathy and personal history with Oz to lull her into a false sense of security, only to find out he's the one that murdered her brother in the first place. Sofia, throughout this entire season, is the victim, and while yes, she does do bad things, she's incredibly sympathetic, and she's someone that is just trying to get out of this life that has had such a stranglehold on her. The season's midpoint, its change of pace, and its absolute about-face is Sofia's realization of this betrayal and her internal promise to never fully trust again. The show's fourth episode alters the series genetically from a descendant of The Sopranos to something more closely akin to a modern-day Game of Thrones. From the episode's in-depth character breakdown of Sofia to its Red Wedding finale, it serves as the key to the series' success. Without Sofia, the show might as well have been a standalone film in its runtime. Oz knows how to handle these men who play war games on the streets of Gotham, but Sofia is different, and her existence throws a wrench into every one of his ploys to gain power. Series creator and showrunner Lauren LeFranc mentioned in HBO's Behind the Episode for episode 4 that she views Sofia
as the closest thing we have to a hero on our show.
Sofia and Oz stand parallel to each other in that their current drives and goals were derived from their respective upbringings, their parental relationships. But while we get to see that Oz's lack of empathy and narcissistic need for his mother's approval never necessarily came from an external force, Sofia's volatile nature and vindictive focus comes directly from her father's actions, and subsequently her family's insistence on upholding the same values that put her in an asylum in the first place, even after her father was gone. Both pre- and post-banishment, Sofia presents as a figure that could break the cycle of her family's bloody legacy. We see the version of Sofia that focused on philanthropy and used her family's name as a tool to help others rather than keep those in poverty perpetually on the wheel of addiction as a source of income. And the one that hits its breaking point after Oz's deception comes to light seeks to break the cycle of abuse in a different way, by eliminating the abusers in general. The tragedy of Sofia lies embedded in her realization that by doing so, she's no different than an angsty teen who dyes their hair pink in rebellion. And this results in Sofia continuing the cycle for her niece, at least initially. She left one prison and returned to the same one her father made for her. By rebelling the way she has, she's become exactly who her father wanted her to be. And while you might not feel too compelled to feel sympathy for someone who just pulled a red wedding on her own family, the emotional kickback she exhibits when she realizes her role in the cycle of abuse proves that beneath the layers of bent corruption, her humanity is still intact. That is something Oz will never have. She decides to tell her niece the truth about their family and promises a better life for her after seeing the self-harm that's already been inflicted because of Sofia's revenge. She sees herself in her niece and recognizes that she has to put a stop to this. She has to leave this life behind altogether. The only way to end it is to get out. to burn her father's empire down and leave it all behind, starting her life anew and allowing herself to pursue what it is that she wants, her own hopes, desires, and dreams, instead of continuing to work within the prison her father has constructed for her. We see this as well in her interaction with Eve, someone she feels is equally as manipulated and pathetically lives as a captive. Not only does she find this not to be true, but she earns respect for the life she's built for herself and her girls. She's built her own community and found family who love and respect her in a way the Falcones never did for Sofia. While it may seem like Eve's playing a man's game, it couldn't be more the opposite. Eve's managed to forge a life of control and take advantage of the vulnerability and insecurity of her clients, like Oz, for her own personal gain in order to benefit and help out her family. It's nothing malicious per se, it's obviously mutual, but she retains all the power, and that's something Sofia can't help but admire. A woman captaining her own ship, in control of her own choices and destiny. That's all Sofia ever wanted, and it's what she feels like she'll never have. Sofia, at her core, is a character we want to root for, one that we should want to see come out on top with some form of satisfying ending. But as the show isn't titled Sofia, its creators still bank on us placing some faith in the Penguin, hoping that some shred of our desires, no matter how utterly despicable he acts, lay with wanting a favorable outcome for the hobbling monster. And while by the end of their volatile chess match, the Penguin may have placed her in a fate worse than death, her continued existence, contacts on the outside, and a leading letter from her cat-loving half-sibling prime us for a vengeful return in the Batman 2. Or at least some kind of return. I don't know, it seems like she's probably moved past the vengeance part. While Oz's betrayal of Sofia kicked off her tragic undoing, believe it or not, it's not the most unforgivable act he commits in the show. Not even close. No, that horrible honor belongs to the series' brightest spot, Victor Aguilar. While surviving the Riddler's catastrophic hydro-terror attack, Vic has little to no time to mourn the loss of his family as he's thrust into a life of petty crime to survive on the streets of Gotham. In an unfortunate turn of events, one of those petty crimes leads him to attempting to strip the tires off the wrong guy's car. Oz, never being one to miss an opportunity, holds Vic by his side for the evening as extra hands to hide Alberto's body. Through completing the treacherous act, the two seem to bond, and after seeing a bit of his young self in Vic, especially given the fact that he has a stutter and Oz can relate to that because of his own deformity, he spares the kid and takes him under his wing, quickly bringing him into the folds of his life that not a single living soul knows about, i.e. his mother, Frances Cobb. Oswald treats Vic, while at times harshly, like a son, or at least like a little brother. He treats him like family. And while he's absolutely a bad influence on the direction Vic's life takes, Oz promises him power, confidence, and the means to lead a meaningful life. He promises Victor that staying with him means he won't have to die a nobody. Which is why his ultimate betrayal, his most unforgivable act, comes in the form of Vic's unsung demise in the series finale. Vic's presence in the Penguin is necessary for multiple reasons. As we mentioned earlier, his connection to Crown Point serves to us, the audience, as a direct line of sight into the horrors the less fortunate of Gotham continue to experience after the Riddler's attack. He also serves as the audience's window into the world in general. We learn about Oz's world and how it works as Vic does. Perhaps his most important role to play comes, unfortunately, with his death. And while it can be argued that he was offered a way out of his circumstance and chose to stay, in my opinion, it only makes his death even more tragic. I mean, Shakespearean levels of tragic. Instead of choosing to leave his pain behind, Vic opts to stay with Oz because of the Penguin's promise, to lead him toward a powerful and important life, to give him what he always wanted, the life he always wanted. It is only through Vic's eyes that we see any scrap of decency within Oswald. His love and his trust of Oz emanate so strongly from his choice to stay all the way through the end of the series that it infectiously transfers to us as the viewer. Even after we learn the truth behind Oz's brothers' deaths, Vic's innocence to the matter, and honestly in general, keeps us tied to the Penguin in some way, shape, or form. The problem is, with Vic around, there may always be a part of us that will root for Oz the next time we see him around. Oz's story of rising from poverty to make something of himself is relatable. It's great. It's a rags to riches story we all want to see from a protagonist. The issue is that the backstory for Oz is only half true. Yeah, he got the riches part, but he didn't necessarily come from rags. While he fancies viewing himself as a hero of the common folk, as the person who can rally the less fortunate together, he's not. Vic is. It's an evolution we see come to fruition in the joining together of the multiple lower-class gangs that claim territory in Gotham City. Every single secondary took control of their respective groups because of Vic's rallying, not Oz's. His innocence and his honest pursuit of a better life reach a wider audience because they have what Oz's plight never did, truth to it. And truly, I think at some point Oz sees that. Vic was able to do what Oz never was, and that makes him a threat. I love how that classism is depicted through the gang wars here. We've got new money versus old money, new power versus old power, the ego and greed and comfortability of the old families not considering how their actions affected the most overlooked within their ranks. The show is really about the powerless seizing control for themselves, having a seat at the table. That's what the turbulence of Gotham has brought them. Yeah, it's great that the organized families of old are largely eradicated, but these new guys turn the power vacuum into the wild fucking West, and as we see, it's not really that much better. In fact, it's much worse, especially when you've got people like Oz that are kind of leading the charge here. The Penguin survives because he represents the extreme depravity and soullessness that infect the streets of Gotham's poorest boroughs. He represents the worst of what those areas can be, whereas Vic represents the potential for what those areas can be, for people who recognize that they've been neglected for a long time and want to properly elevate themselves, not necessarily in a selfish way, but collectively. But it's why the Penguin remains sympathetic for as long as he does, because you understand his background to an extent and his socioeconomic status. His relationship with Vic feels earnest. It feels like they actually have a shared commonality, that they both kind of grew up in a similar way. And it's only in the final episodes that we realize that maybe that wasn't necessarily the case. You feel like maybe, in a sense, he's a necessary force of change that will ultimately amount to a lot of good for his community. But then, he throws it all away for a penthouse and a prostitute. It's the corruption of the American dream that we see through Oz. There's nothing more pretty or desirable about it. In fact, it's a fucking lie, especially in a place like Gotham City. The Penguin represents the fantasy of the American dream. He makes all of these promises to Vic, only to turn around and strangle him to death. It's not obtainable for regular, hardworking people. It's only obtainable for the opportunists, the backstabbers, liars, and hustlers. Anyone with a genuine heart will be curb-stomped in the alleyway. Victor is the tragic victim of this whole thing, someone directionless, without purpose or family, who finds family with the one person who would kill his own to get to where he wants to be. The promise Oz makes to him, the encouragement, the trust, it turns Oz from a ruthless gangster with a sliver of a heart left into the most despicable, hateable villain in the entirety of the Reeves-verse. While some may choose to believe that Oz's cutting of Vic's story short had something to do with eliminating a weakness he sees attached to himself, I'm sure that was a small part of it, I truly believe, to his core, his intentions were much, much more selfish. Because Oz doesn't just kill Victor. He gives him an unceremonious and worse, anonymous death, taking the money he gave him out of his wallet and chucking his only identification into the river, the same place he left the last family members to get in the way of what he wanted. Victor's death, while tragic, is a necessary part of the show's finale because it serves as the push for us, the audience, to finally cut ties from the toxic relationship we had developed with Oswald Cobb. HBO's The Penguin stands as a pillar of excellence and as an example for future showrunners to look to when sculpting a series derived from a feature-length prelude. It's a series that no doubt will be used in acting classes in years to come, with S-tier writing only made somehow better by the all-star performances from the show's stellar cast. This series was handled with so much care and respect for its source material, while simultaneously never faltering in its bravery to take chances. In both the categories of the crime thriller and comic book show, it stands as a major cut above the rest. Like, this is definitively the greatest comic book television show ever. Where many other super spin-offs have failed to differentiate when a story should be written as a show and when it should be a feature film, The Penguin identified exactly how long it needed to tell its tale in full and doesn't hang around for a second longer. Able to skillfully weave together origins and outcomes for its three major players, Oz, Vic, and Sofia, it hooks us by getting us to root for the morally worst character amongst the three, only to teach us a lesson for doing so by its conclusion. In doing so, LeFranc and the rest of the show's team assembled a thrill ride that never quits and never asked for more than it gave. The show successfully gave me both a villain to root for and a reason to cheer the next time Batman comes knocking on the penthouse apartment door, Oz claimed by being exactly who he's always been. The monster who fancies himself the hero. The Penguin.